What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to look at where Bitcoin's at and see if it's still following typical bear market structure and figure out if where the bottom's going to be, what is the potential path we're going to get there. And I'm going to show you guys some tools that you guys can use so that you can estimate these kinds of things for yourself as well. So without further ado, let's get into the charts. So this is, again, the price of Bitcoin in TradingView. So right now we're at the weekly view, and you can see that this is the weekly price of Bitcoin. We did the Bollinger Bands here, and you can see that the Bollinger Bands has a middle band. We drew this a few weeks ago to see that this is like the middle line of the Bollinger, and we were saying that it's probably gonna follow this middle line until it makes a decision. So when we drew this way back at the start of June, right, at June 15, we drew this down here at June 15. It was still down here, and now it's actually approaching this middle band, right? So now it's probably going to make a decision whether or not it's going to break up or it's going to break down. My suspect is it's going to slowly get squeezed. So I think, so if we can just draw a line here from like this level, like that previous support, right? I think it's just going to keep bouncing into this, and it's going to get squeezed into this channel until it makes a decision, right? I think that's what's going to happen. So from June, like early June until the end of July, probably it'll touch this band, and then in August it's probably going to go back down, and then in September we're probably going to find a move on what it's going to do. And one of the reasons why I think this is the potential path to that is when we looked at this in June, we actually had this seasonality calendar. So this calendar is actually, this is the years of Bitcoin and this is the months. So you can see actually the average of each month and the standard deviation in the range, right? So if we just remove the first year and the current year, because it's not a full year yet, so other years have like extra dates, right? So we want all the dates to be the same. Yeah, if we remove those, we can see all the average prices of the historical months, right? We said that July is going to be a positive month because on average it is a positive month, right? So given that on average July is a positive month, I think that July is going to end up positive. And when we said this in June, it was still down here. So now it is going up to this upper band. And the reason why I think August will be negative is August is plus 1%. But if you check all of this, it's actually the only main reason is because it has such a positive 2017. If we take a look at the number of negatives versus the number of positives, it actually had a lot more negative months. So if we count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So out of the 13 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 out of the 13 was negative, right? So this will probably also be negative. So I think we're going to go up in July. We're going to hit this trend line, and then we're going to get squeezed back down to this level. And that will probably be what the August would look like. And then in September is actually the worst month for Bitcoin. It's -3. And if you look at everything else, it's the worst month historically for Bitcoin, right? So what I think is going to happen is as it's getting squeezed here, in September, it's going to start to make a decision, and then it's going to probably fall back down to lower levels, right? And the reason why I think it's going to fall to lower levels is not only because September is negative on average, right? But also because if we look at a lot of the on-chain indicators, we're actually not there yet in terms of bottoming, right? So if we look at the realized price, we're not actually hitting the delta price yet. So if we just zoom in, right now, the realized price is at 55K and the lower delta price is at 42K, right? So this is saying that we should at least reach the realized price, which is 55K, because if we look at all of it, it's always hit the realized price, right? The delta price, it also hits it most of the time, but there are some instances where it doesn't hit it. So if we look at last cycle, it did hit the delta price, but it just barely did it. While in other cycles, there are like bigger extensions under the delta price. So it's possible that it might not hit it this cycle. But if it does, that means that we're going to still go all the way down to 42K, right? 55K right now is the realized price. So if we make another leg down, probably in September, we're going to go back down to at least 50K and possibly the 40K levels, right? If we look at the other on-chain charts, we're also not there yet. So this is the net unrealized profit and loss. It just shows whether or not how many people are in profit in terms of on-chain movements of the coins. So you can see historically in all these previous cycles, we've gone below a zero. Even the brief pandemic crash, we went below zero. Right now, we're not yet below zero. So this still has ways to go to signal. If we look at the hodl waves, it's the same thing. We have like the long term and short term. I have other videos explaining all of these charts, but I'm just briefly showing you why a lot of these on-chain indicators have not actually flashed yet. So for example, here the MVRVZ score, it also hasn't reached below this trend line. So, and you see past cycles, it did reach below it. So there's a few things, right? One, we have not reached the bottom indicators in a lot of these on-chain metrics and other metrics as well. So actually, there's a price metric that I use, which is this Bitcoin risk level, and it's showing that the bottom price is at 40K, right? And if we look at the back-tested values, so this means that this is like it was able to back-test the values. Here, the bottom price is still 40K, but historically, it's bottomed around here at the 0.2 level, and the 0.2 level would be at around 54K, right? So since a lot of these things haven't bottomed yet, at least I think we're still at least gonna go back down to 50K or 55K, and 40K level is possible if we have a major crash, but it's still in the cards. But other than that, that's like probably the worst case scenario that we're gonna hit. 50K is definitely highly likely. 40K is possible. Yeah, I don't know how likely it is. According to the risk level, it's probably not. It probably won't reach that level. But according to the, the realized price, delta price, it's saying that it might reach that level. So it's a toss-up on whether we'll hit 40K, but I think high probability that we'll still reach 50K level. So that's one. And in terms of path, because you have to prepare yourself for these time-based moves, it's not always a linear process, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm done waiting. Let's just get it over with. It doesn't work that way. We have to look at the calendar and all these movements. And looking at this, the most likely path that we're going to have is we're probably going to have a negative August. So it's probably going to hit this top middle band by the end of July. And then we're probably going to go down in August. And then by the time we go down in August, it'll be September, and then that's going to be the next bigger crash. So that's how I think it's going to play out. In terms of when exactly that's going to happen, it's anyone's guess. But we can make some, I guess, predictions on when and how much these major crashes will be. So one thing we can look at is actually just the drawdowns that we have from cycle to cycle, right? And also the time-based movements. So if we look at the drawdowns from cycle to cycle, so previous cycle, we can just get a price range and just draw something from the top of this cycle to the bottom of the cycle. So what does this give us? This gives us minus 75%. So last cycle, we had a minus 75% from top to bottom, right? The cycle before that, we can also do the same thing. Let's just draw a price range from top to bottom. And this was an 82% drop, right? So we just put this side by side with each other. And then the cycle before that, let's just do the same thing. Let's just get a price range, and then we draw from top to bottom. So this one was a 76% drop, right? 76% drop. So what do we see here, right? This is saying that we can have somewhere between a 70% drop to an 80% drop, right? If we look at rolling windows, we have the same thing. So I actually have a graph as well called drawdowns and gains. So this Bitcoin, let's just remove the gain, see the drawdown. So yeah, here you can see the same thing. Like the 1 year drawdown was around 82%, and then it was around 70-something%, 75%, and then this was around 78%, right? So if we say this, it's gonna at least have a 70% drop, a 70% drop from our previous stop of 120K. Actually, we have a graph here that shows, yeah, all times, sometimes I forget. So here the last high was 124K, right? So if we just go on the calculator and we do 124K times, actually let's do this on screen so that people can see. So 124 times 0.3 for a 70% drop, because we'll only have 30% left. 124 times 0.3, just Google that. So it's saying that if we have a 70% drop, we're gonna go all the way down to 37K, right? So that is the, one of the worst case scenarios if we follow this. But obviously, I think we have diminishing losses, right? Because every cycle, there's so much more money in Bitcoin. So for the price to move up or down, it takes exponentially more money, right? We can't really compare it to the previous cycles too much. So if we follow like diminishing cycle losses, we have this 82% to around 75%. That is around a 7% difference. Maybe the next one will be a 68% drop, because this is a 77% difference between the two. So if I just do a 68% drop, right? A 68% drop would put at 32, 32. That will give us at 4, it'll put us around 39K. So that's pretty near our other prediction on Bitcoin where it's saying it's 40K. And also in the realized price, we're saying 40K. So yeah, so if we do worst case drops based on historical stuff, it's saying that we can get at least a 68% drop, which will put us around 40K, right? And so in terms of date ranges, if we do have this massive crash, right? We did this last time as well, but what we did was we drew these lines. So this is basically from the top, I just drew it to the bottom. From the top, I drew it to the bottom. So this is like 52 bars. We did the same for the last cycle, top to bottom, this is 51 bars, and this one 60 bars, right? So if we just do the same thing, like previous two cycles was around 52 bars, we do 52 bars here, that will put us around 12th of October. Actually, no. Yeah, 5th of October. So very early October or like late September, right? But that's already like when the crash is already in. So, we have the big crash very late September or like early weeks of October. And I think that'll probably be where we have the major 50, 60% crash, right? And I think that'll probably be it. So actually, the problem with this is like, oh yeah, it's a little bit dubious because we're just drawing lines. But can we make it more systematic, right? So we are expecting somewhere between a 68%, 60 to 70% crash, right? Among all of the 60 to 70% crashes that happened, like all of the 70% crashes, how many days did it take for that to happen, right? So from this price to this price, that was 51 bars. That was around a 70% crash. But there are other 70% crashes and there are other 60% crashes. If we take all of the 70% crashes, what is the average days that it takes for it to do that? And what happens is we have this graph in our charts called the days to cross. So what this does is actually we can set up a move. So is it an up move or a down move? So let's say it goes down, right? And then we put a threshold. So 80 goes down 80%. There's only like these few times it happened, right? So it's only this 2017 cycle where there was an 80% move. But if we look at 70% moves, now we're starting to see a little bit more lines. For 70% moves, we had some up here in 2013, we had some down here, and we had some up here also in 2021. So these lines are actually how many days it took for this price to have a 70% drop. So for example, I'm hovering over here on the 12th, on December 5, 2017, that price, whatever price that was on, took 366 days later for it to crash 70%, right? And other days have different. So for example, in 2021, the 70% crash happened over 600 days for it to get the 70% crash. And the reason why all these other dates happened was, the price was too low for it to experience 70% crash, so lines never appeared. But then what happens now is you can actually average. So you can get a mean and standard deviation of all of the 70% crashes and see what happens. So for a 70% crash, it's saying that on average, it took 349 days for a 70% crash to happen, right? And so if we look at all-time high clusters again, the latest cycle high was around 124K, and it ended at around October 6, 2025. So if we go back to the days to cross model and we put in a date, so let's just say October 6, October 6, 2025, right? And we put in the mean. If we apply that, that puts us at the target date of September 20. Sorry? Yeah, September 20, right? August is, July, yeah. So basically, that's the saying that if we look at all 70% crashes in Bitcoin's history, on average, it took 349 days for a 70% crash to happen, given that price. If we look at the prior all-time high and project another 70% crash, because we looked at all of the different crashes and it looked like 70% crash was possible, we would expect it to take, on average, 149 days from the previous all-time high of October 6 to happen. And that would bring us to a date of September 20, right? So basically, in September 20, that's saying where it's the most likely we would have already experienced a 70% crash from the previous all-time high on October 5th, right? So that's also the reason why I think September is the likely bottom for Bitcoin. So just a recap of everything we've looked at. One, we looked at the bottom price of Bitcoin, and we saw that on average, it's doing a 70% to 80% crash. If we extrapolate it to diminishing returns, it's around a 68% crash from top to bottom. Given that it's going to be a 68% crash, we looked at also the days from top to bottom, and this is putting us somewhere around the 5th of October to be like the bottom if we look at it time base wise, just from peak to low. If we extrapolate the 70% crash to all dates that had 70% crashes, we can get a finer number on the average, which it actually takes 350 days. And that would put us at around it will put us around September 20, right? So that's probably a realistic path of what we're seeing here. So yeah, August, we're probably, this July, it's probably gonna go up. August, we're probably gonna go back down to this lower range. And then around September, it's probably gonna crash around September or early October. And then by that time, if we go back to the calendar, what's gonna happen actually is it's actually gonna probably go back up from there. So if we just look at monthly returns, October is actually a pretty positive month. On average, it's plus 17%, right? So I think the start of October would still be really low from the September crash. And then we're gonna have a slightly positive October, and I think the cycle will continue from there. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty exciting time. The bear market is where most of the money is made, so I actually have a lot of dry powder to invest in September. And in terms of altcoins, actually, if we look at altcoins, just look at Ethereum, for example. Ethereum is actually kind of the index for altcoins. And so if you're wondering if this is the time to invest in altcoins, I think it's not yet the time. I think we wait for Bitcoin to fall first. And I think it's gonna bring with it a lot of the alts because it's a higher risk asset. So after September crashes after the September crash, probably, that's when we're probably gonna consider buying more Bitcoin and also altcoins, right? So the reason why I brought up altcoins is we have this other tab called versus comparisons, and this is actually a chart that shows relative value of things versus other assets. So for example, this is the price of ETH and this is the price of gold, but we can make it ETH versus Bitcoin, right? And then this bottom chart is actually ETH versus Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is going up at a faster rate than ETH, then this chart is going up. And if Bitcoin is going down at a faster rate than ETH, then this chart will be going down. So basically, if ETH is gaining value over Bitcoin, then this is going up. And if ETH is losing value over Bitcoin, it's going down. So this shows us when ETH is relatively overvalued or undervalued relative to Bitcoin. And the reason I brought it up is because we're still down here, right? Which has historically been okay to buy. But historically as well, it's gone to these levels wherein it actually flatlines. And that's probably the best times to buy ETH. So right now we still have downward momentum. And if you look at this hump right now, it looks like it's still gonna break down, right? So if you just imagine you don't know anything about crypto and you're just looking at this line and I ask you, fill in the missing blank, you would probably just draw this going down, right? And this is also in line with the thing we're talking about. If Bitcoin falls in September, ETH is probably going to fall and this is probably going to crash down. And at that point, that's probably going to be the best time to enter ETH and other alts. Because once alts and ETH have bled to levels that people couldn't even imagine it to go to, and people are screaming that it's dead, that's probably the time that you should pile in to buy it. So that's my thoughts basically on the altcoin market on Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited for August and September. I'm trying to accumulate as much capital as I can right now so that I can position myself with a good entry coming these few months. So yeah, if you guys like this type of content, I do weekly crypto market update videos every month, actually every week. So we have this going on every week so you guys can have a pulse on the market. And right now we're actually building out this crypto app. So if you go to Lofi-Ledger.com and you create an account, we actually have this. So this has all the charts. And if you're having a hard time thinking about these charts and how to read them, I'm actually creating like this chat bot wherein you can just type and then figure out the answers based on all the charts and the data that we're looking at. So yeah, if you guys want, you can create an account. All the charts are free. The chatbot, unfortunately, isn't free because I have to pay for the tokens for the chatbot to happen. So I actually need to offset that cost to you guys, right? So if you want to know and ask questions, there's going to be a fee on that. The fee isn't up yet, so I actually don't have a way to even accept payments right now. But I'm also going to be releasing an app so you can ask questions anytime and it'll pull data for you. But yeah, that's basically it. If you guys found value in this video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.